I hired my new caregiver because my doctor insisted I shouldn't live alone after my fall. 3 days later, I overheard her talking to my bank from the kitchen. The representative asked for my security phrase before discussing my account. Without the slightest hesitation, she answered with 7 words only my late brother and I had ever known. The banker accepted it immediately. I said nothing. Because I remembered exactly why we created that phrase, and I knew with absolute certainty I had never shared it with another living person. If you've ever wondered how trust quietly disappears before money ever does, stay with me. Karen Foster seemed like exactly the kind of caregiver everyone hopes to find. She arrived on time. She organized my medications. She wrote reminders on the kitchen calendar without treating me like a child. After my fall, I couldn't safely climb the basement stairs alone. Temporary help made sense. Losing my independence didn't. As a retired Navy communications specialist, I spent 27 years protecting information that sounded ordinary until the wrong person repeated it. Passwords, verification phrases, authentication routines. The safest code was often the one nobody believed mattered. My younger brother Daniel and I had invented that bank phrase after our father nearly became the victim of a telephone scam decades earlier. We promised each other it would never be written down, never emailed, never repeated outside the two of us. Daniel passed away 5 years ago. That should have left exactly one living person who knew those 7 words. Me. Karen finished the call before noticing I had entered the kitchen. "There you are," she said with a warm smile. "The bank needed to verify your account before sending replacement checks. I appreciate you handling it. They asked for your security phrase." "I heard." She laughed softly. "I was afraid I'd forget it." "Interesting." "Not I almost asked you. Not you reminded me." She spoke as though knowing it had always been expected. That afternoon, my nephew Mark stopped by carrying groceries. "How's the new caregiver?" "So far, she's organized." "That's good." I poured 2 cups of coffee. She knew my banking security phrase. He barely looked up. "You probably told her after the hospital." "I don't think I did." "You were on pain medication." He shrugged gently. "You probably just don't remember." The explanation sounded reasonable. Too reasonable. Military communications taught me another habit. When the first explanation arrives unusually fast, document it before believing it. That evening, I opened the small notebook where I tracked blood pressure readings after my fall. Instead of writing medical notes, I listed every unusual thing Karen had done since arriving. Nothing dramatic. Only patterns. She always answered the house phone before the second ring. She knew where I kept old insurance files. She never asked which bank handled my retirement deposits. Most people learn routines gradually. She seemed to arrive already knowing them. Before going to bed, I opened the locked desk drawer where Daniel and I once stored emergency family papers. The envelope containing our original password reminder remained sealed. The phrase wasn't written anywhere inside, because we had promised it never would be. For the first time since Karen repeated those 7 words into the telephone, I stopped wondering whether I had forgotten something. I started wondering who had learned something they never should have known. The morning after Karen repeated my private security phrase, I made a decision that surprised even me. I stopped correcting her. If she believed I was becoming more dependent, I would let her believe it. Not because I enjoyed surrendering small pieces of my routine. Because 27 years in Navy communications taught me that people reveal more information after they stop worrying about what you already know. Karen arrived at 8 carrying a clipboard and a neatly organized medication schedule. I moved your afternoon pills into the kitchen. That makes sense. I also updated some paperwork while I was on the phone yesterday. What kind of paperwork? Nothing major. She smiled warmly. Just routine contact information. Interesting. She answered the question, but not really. After breakfast, she helped me sort several insurance envelopes that had been collecting on the dining room table since my fall. Halfway through the stack, I noticed something unfamiliar. The emergency contact listed on my supplemental insurance policy no longer displayed my own phone number. It listed Karen's, not Mark's, not mine. Karen's. I held the page a little longer than necessary. Did I approve this? She looked over casually. Oh. That was already being updated. By whom? I assumed your nephew had discussed it with you. Assumed. Another careful word. Not I know. Not I watched him. Only assumed. That afternoon, Mark stopped by after work. How's everything going? Pretty smoothly. I handed him the insurance form. My emergency contact changed. He glanced at the page for barely 2 seconds. Oh. I probably handled that while you were recovering. You probably did. I don't remember signing anything. He smiled sympathetically. You were taking pain medication. There it was again. The same explanation. Almost word for word. Medication, forgetfulness, recovery. Each answer sounded reasonable on its own. Together, they began sounding rehearsed. That evening, I opened the notebook where I had started recording small inconsistencies. Instead of writing opinions, I listed only facts. Karen knew the security phrase, insurance contact changed. Both explanations relied on medication. Neither included dates. Facts age better than suspicions. The following morning, Karen drove me to my physical therapy appointment. While she checked me in, I remained quietly seated near the reception desk. The receptionist reviewed my file. I see your insurance contact was updated. When? She looked at her computer. About 2 weeks before your hospitalization. I smiled politely. Thank you. Karen returned before I could ask anything else. On the drive home, she talked cheerfully about grocery shopping and physical therapy exercises. I nodded through most of the conversation. Inside my head, only one sentence remained. 2 weeks before my fall. That was impossible. No one could have changed my emergency contact because of an accident that hadn't happened yet. For the first time since Karen entered my home, I wasn't simply collecting unusual moments. I had found a timeline that refused to obey ordinary cause and effect. After learning that my insurance contact had been changed 2 weeks before my accident, I stopped trying to convince myself there was a harmless explanation. Instead, I decided to become easier to underestimate. That strategy had served me well during 27 years in Navy communications. People protect information when they think you're paying attention. They become careless when they believe you've stopped. The following morning, Karen found me staring at the television with the remote upside down. She smiled kindly. Need a little help? I suppose I do. She took the remote, pressed 2 buttons, and handed it back. There you go. I don't know what I'd do without you. Her expression softened. Neither of us mentioned that I had deliberately held the remote incorrectly. That afternoon, I called Grace Miller, the manager of my community bank. Grace had known my brother and me for nearly 20 years. She also understood something few people appreciated. Communications security leaves records, not just conversations. Records. I have a strange question, I told her. I'm listening. Can the bank see when someone successfully authenticates an account? Yes. Without discussing balances or transactions? Yes. She paused. Why are you asking? I think someone knows something they shouldn't. Grace didn't press me. Instead, she invited me to stop by the next morning. Karen offered to drive me. I'd rather not trouble you. I insist. Perfect. The next day, Grace greeted us warmly. Karen waited in the lobby while Grace escorted me into a small office. I reviewed your authentication history, and she turned her monitor toward me. Successful security phrase verification occurred 3 times before your hospitalization. I looked at her quietly. 3? Yes. I was healthy then. I know. The dates matched the impossible insurance timeline almost perfectly. Someone had already been preparing access before I ever slipped on the basement stairs. Grace pointed to another detail. Each authentication requested administrative updates. What kind? Emergency contacts. There it was. The first clue had just connected to the second. Neither depended on memory anymore. Both depended on timestamps. As I walked back through the lobby, Karen stood immediately. Everything all right? Just routine paperwork, she smiled. I figured. On the drive home, she seemed unusually relaxed, almost relieved. That evening, I continued pretending I needed extra reminders. Karen began speaking more freely. She explained my appointments before I asked. She answered phone calls before the second ring. She even reminded me where important documents were stored inside my own desk. Not because she was searching, because she already knew. Late that afternoon, the mail arrived. Karen carried the envelopes inside. Most were ordinary. Prescription statements, utility bills, community newsletters. One official envelope caught my attention. County Probate Division. Karen glanced at it. Probably nothing urgent. She quietly placed it beneath 2 advertising flyers before walking into the kitchen. Interesting. After she left the room, I pulled the envelope free. It had never been opened. Across the front, a bright red stamp read, Time-sensitive court notice. For the first time since overhearing my secret security phrase, I realized this investigation was no longer just about my bank account. Someone expected me not to read what the court had already mailed to my own home. I waited until Karen left for the pharmacy before opening the envelope from the County Probate Division. The paper inside wasn't a bill. It wasn't a jury summons. It was a formal notice advising me that a preliminary capacity hearing had been scheduled in 12 days. I read the first paragraph twice. The court intended to determine whether I still possessed sufficient capacity to manage my own financial affairs. No one had ever discussed such a hearing with me. Not my physician, not my attorney, not my family. Yet according to the notice, someone had already submitted supporting documentation. For several minutes, I simply sat at the kitchen table listening to the grandfather clock my brother had repaired years before. Its steady ticking suddenly sounded different, not comforting, measured, like a countdown. During my Navy career, communications failures usually followed one predictable pattern. Information wasn't stolen all at once. It moved quietly through authorized channels until someone finally noticed that every small transfer pointed toward the same destination. The hearing wasn't the beginning. It was the destination. Everything else had merely prepared the path. That afternoon, I drove to the probate clerk's office with Grace Miller. She insisted on coming after I explained only one thing. "I've found records that existed before my accident." She nodded. "Then let's see what else existed." The clerk retrieved the public filing. Several documents remained confidential, others did not. The petition itself listed my nephew Mark as the concerned family member requesting protective review. Attached beneath it appeared an assessment summary prepared by a private consultant. Karen's caregiver notes had also been referenced. I frowned. Those notes were written after my fall. Yes. Grace quietly pointed farther down the page. The petition wasn't. The filing date preceded my hospitalization by 11 days. Another impossible date. First the insurance contact, then the bank authentication. Now the court petition. Every administrative step had begun before the accident, supposedly making them necessary. Outside the courthouse, neither of us spoke for several moments. Finally, Grace asked, "What are you thinking?" "I don't believe Mark started this." "You think someone approached him?" "I think someone offered him an answer before he fully understood the question." On the drive home, I remembered something else. 5 months earlier, Mark had mentioned refinancing his house after unexpected business losses. At the time, he laughed it away. I never asked another question. Perhaps I should have. That evening, Karen prepared dinner while talking cheerfully about my upcoming therapy appointments. She behaved exactly as she always had. Patient, professional, helpful. Nothing in her manner suggested malice, only routine, which somehow troubled me even more. People following a script rarely realize who wrote it. Later that night, I searched an old family file cabinet for tax correspondence. Instead, I found a collection notice addressed to Mark. The balance wasn't enormous, but several handwritten notes across the envelope mentioned repayment deadlines and legal collection. Folded inside was a business card from the same financial consulting firm listed on the probate petition. For the first time since overhearing my secret security phrase, the investigation stopped being about whether someone wanted control of my finances. The larger question became why a struggling nephew had suddenly appeared inside every document leading toward a hearing he never seemed prepared to explain. 12 days no longer felt like much time. The hearing had quietly become the center of every document I found. The bank records pointed toward it. The insurance changes pointed toward it. Even Karen's carefully written caregiver notes now seemed less like observations and more like building blocks laid one page at a time. Yet I still couldn't bring myself to confront Mark. Not because I doubted the evidence, because I doubted the story behind it. During my Navy years, I learned that intercepted messages often revealed only half the conversation. The other half usually explained why otherwise decent people made terrible decisions. I needed that missing half. The following afternoon, I invited Mark over for lunch. Nothing formal, just sandwiches and coffee. Karen offered to prepare everything. That would be wonderful, I said. Then I quietly added, I'll probably need your help balancing the checkbook afterward. She smiled. Of course. Exactly as I expected. The more dependent I appeared, the more comfortable everyone became. Mark arrived looking exhausted. Dark circles rested beneath his eyes. He smiled when he saw me, but it never quite reached them. How's therapy going? Slowly. You'll get there. I hope so. For several minutes we talked about baseball, the weather, and Emily's upcoming school recital. Then the conversation drifted toward finances. Business getting any better? He hesitated. A little. Still refinancing? His eyes immediately dropped toward his coffee. Working on it. That single pause told me more than a long explanation could have. People rarely look away before answering questions they truly believe. After lunch, Karen carried dishes into the kitchen. Mark quietly leaned closer. I hate asking this. Asking what? Are you doing all right? I think so. You've seemed different since the fall. Different. Not confused. Not forgetful. Different. Someone had coached everyone to describe me without making direct accusations. Before he left, Emily ran inside carrying a school drawing. I made this for Great Uncle Robert. She handed me a picture of 2 sailboats, one larger, one smaller. My brother and I used to race model sailboats every summer. Emily couldn't have known that. She simply smiled. Dad says families stay together. I looked toward Mark. His face tightened for just a moment. After they left, I placed Emily's drawing inside the same notebook where I had been documenting evidence. Not as proof, as a reminder. Whatever happened at the hearing could not come at her expense. That evening, Grace Miller called. I found something else. What is it? The consulting firm. What about them? They've represented several capacity petitions during the past year. And they're also debt restructuring advisors. I closed my eyes. So both services come from the same office. Yes. She paused. And Mark met with them 3 months before your fall. Later that night, I searched through another box of old family correspondence. Behind several birthday cards, I found a collection letter addressed to Mark. Stapled behind it sat a repayment proposal prepared by the same consulting firm. Across the final page, someone had handwritten one sentence. Guardianship review may improve financial resolution. For the first time since Karen spoke my private security phrase into the telephone, I finally understood why Mark looked more frightened than dishonest. Someone hadn't simply recruited him. They had convinced him there was only one way left to save his family. 7 days remained before the capacity hearing. By then, I no longer doubted what was happening. The only question left was how to stop it without turning Mark into the villain of a story someone else had written. During my years in Navy communications, every security breach followed the same principle. The first leaked password explained access. The original record explaining where it came from established responsibility. I needed that original record. The next morning, I unlocked the old cedar chest my brother and I had kept since our Navy days. Inside were photographs, amateur radio manuals, faded Christmas cards, and a weathered leather notebook we jokingly called our communications log. Most families would have thrown it away decades earlier. We never did. Inside the notebook, we recorded every important security change we ever made after helping our father recover from that attempted telephone scam. Not passwords, never passwords, only the reasons they existed. Near the middle of the notebook, I found the entry I had hoped still survived. Security phrase established jointly by Robert and Daniel Hayes, shared verbally only, never record phrase itself, never authorize third-party verification. Beneath it appeared both our signatures, mine and my brother's. That single page changed everything. It didn't reveal the phrase. It proved the phrase had always been protected by design. No caregiver could honestly claim she learned it through ordinary conversation. Track A had finally become Track B. The mystery had become evidence. That afternoon, Grace Miller came to the house carrying certified copies of the bank authentication history. "I thought you'd want originals. I appreciate that." She placed 3 documents beside the leather notebook. Each successful verification occurred before my fall. Each requested administrative updates. Each used the same authentication pathway later relied upon after Karen entered my home. Grace looked at the notebook for several moments. "I've never seen anything quite like this. My brother believed memories fail, but written reasons don't." She smiled quietly. He was right. Late that afternoon, Karen arrived with groceries. I stopped by the pharmacy. "Thank you." She noticed the notebook resting on the table. "Family history?" "In a way." She smiled. "You've been looking through old things a lot lately." "I suppose I have." For a brief moment, she looked almost uncomfortable. Then she quickly changed the subject. "I confirmed your transportation for next week's appointment." Not therapy, not rehabilitation. She simply called it next week's appointment. Interesting, someone expected me to arrive without asking too many questions. That evening, Mark stopped by unexpectedly. "I wanted to make sure everything's okay." "It is." "You've seemed quieter." "I've been thinking." He nodded slowly. "I guess that's normal." Then, almost as though repeating advice someone else had given him, he added, "The hearing will probably make everything easier." The hearing. Not if there was one. Not I heard about it. He already expected it to happen. I simply smiled. Maybe. Relief crossed his face. Exactly what I wanted him to feel. Later that night, Grace called one final time. The consulting firm contacted the bank again today. What did they want? They confirmed attendance for the capacity hearing. I looked once more at the leather notebook signed by my brother. They've been given every opportunity to stop. Grace remained silent. So have I. I gently closed the notebook. The trap was finally complete. Everyone involved now believed I had accepted the hearing, accepted my dependency, and accepted the quiet transfer of responsibility. Only Grace knew that the one document capable of unraveling the entire case had never been shown to anyone else. And until the hearing began, that was exactly where it would remain. The capacity hearing began on a quiet Thursday morning. Most of the people inside the courtroom believed they already knew how it would end. Karen sat beside the consulting firm's representative. Mark avoided looking in my direction. Grace Miller quietly took a seat behind me. No one seemed surprised to see an elderly veteran walking with a cane after a recent fall. That was exactly the image they expected. During 27 years in Navy communications, I attended countless security reviews. The outcome rarely depended on who spoke first. It depended on which records had existed before anyone realized they would someday matter. When the hearing began, the consultant calmly summarized the petition. Recent fall. Increasing dependence. Medication. Caregiver observations. Administrative assistance. Each statement sounded reasonable by itself. Together, they formed a picture of a man gradually losing the ability to manage his affairs. The judge listened carefully, then looked toward me. Mr. Hayes, would you like to respond? I would. I stood slowly, resting one hand on my cane. I don't dispute that I fell. I don't dispute that I accepted temporary help. I don't even dispute that I needed assistance. I paused. What I dispute is the timeline. The courtroom became completely silent. I handed the clerk a certified packet prepared with Grace's help. The first document showed the bank authentication history. 3 successful security phrase verifications, all completed before my accident. Next came the insurance records. Emergency contact changes. Again, completed before my hospitalization. Then the unopened probate notice, prepared before my recovery even began. Finally, I placed the worn leather notebook on the evidence table. I'd like the court to read one page. The judge opened it carefully. Across the page appeared my brother's signature beside my own. Beneath them, one simple instruction. Security phrase shared verbally only. Never authorize third-party verification. I spoke quietly. The notebook contains no password. It contains only the rule protecting it. Grace then presented certified confirmation from the bank. The same security phrase had authenticated administrative requests before my injury. The consultant immediately stood. Those records don't prove who supplied the phrase. No, I answered calmly. They prove something more important. I turned toward Karen. Did anyone tell you the phrase came directly from me? She looked startled. No. Were you told it had already been approved for use? Yes. By whom? She hesitated, then quietly identified the consulting firm employee who had coordinated her assignment. No accusations, only answers to direct questions. The consultant objected immediately, but the judge raised one hand. Continue. Grace placed one final document before the court. The original authentication policy from my community bank. It required the account holder's direct participation unless written authorization already existed. No such authorization had ever been filed. The room fell silent once again. The judge slowly closed the folder. The chronology presented today substantially contradicts the petition. He looked toward the consultant. This court cannot proceed on records that appear to have relied upon administrative actions occurring before the circumstances used to justify them. The petition was dismissed without prejudice. No guardianship, no financial control, no declaration that I lacked capacity. Outside the courthouse, Mark caught up with me before I reached my truck. His voice trembled. I never wanted this. I know. They said it would protect everyone. I know. I thought I was saving Emily. I looked at him for a long moment. The hardest lies to recognize are the ones wrapped inside good intentions. He lowered his head. Behind us, Karen quietly walked away without speaking. She had entered my life believing she was helping an elderly man recover. She left, knowing she had unknowingly become part of someone else's carefully written script. As Grace and I reached the parking lot, I realized the hearing had never truly been about proving I remembered a password. It had been about proving that the truth had been documented long before anyone tried to rewrite it. 3 months after the capacity hearing, Karen no longer worked as my caregiver. She visited anyway. Not because anyone required her to. Because she wanted to apologize without another court date standing between us. We sat on the back porch where my brother Daniel and I used to repair old amateur radios every Saturday morning. Karen placed a small envelope on the table. I found this while cleaning my files. Inside was a handwritten note from the consulting firm assigning her to my case. Most of it contained ordinary scheduling instructions. One sentence had been underlined twice. Encourage family confidence in increasing dependence. Karen looked at me quietly. I thought I was helping you recover. I know. I didn't realize someone else had already decided what recovery was supposed to look like. I folded the note and placed it inside the leather communications notebook. Not as another piece of evidence. As a reminder that good intentions deserve honest questions. Mark came by later that afternoon with Emily. His debt had not disappeared overnight, but he had withdrawn from the consulting firm's financial program, arranged a legitimate repayment plan, and begun rebuilding his business one careful step at a time. When he reached the porch, he stopped beside my chair. I don't expect forgiveness. I wasn't waiting for perfection. I was hoping for honesty. He nodded. This time you'll have it. Emily ran toward the old workbench where my brother and I had spent countless weekends fixing radios. She picked up a weathered Morse code practice key. What does this do? I smiled. It teaches people to send messages clearly. She pressed it once. It sounds simple. It is. Then why is it hard? Because the hardest messages are usually the truthful ones. She thought about that for a long moment. Then Huang carefully placed the key back where she had found it. That evening, I opened the leather notebook one final time. On the inside cover, beneath my brother's signature and mine, I added one more sentence. The strongest security is never a password. It is the character of the people trusted to protect it. I closed the notebook and returned it to the cedar chest. Not because I feared another breach. Because one day Emily would inherit both the notebook and the responsibility that came with it. If this story reminded you that trust is built through honesty long before it is tested by hardship, carry that lesson into your own family. Protect what matters, ask difficult questions with compassion, and remember that dignity is never preserved by taking someone's voice away. It is preserved by listening before deciding for them. God bless every veteran, every caregiver, every family, and every quiet guardian who chooses truth over convenience and leaves the next generation a legacy of trust instead of fear.